Hey guys, so we're continuing on with the Cold War, and what we're going to look at today is how the actual Cold War was fought. We've discussed that during the Cold War, it wasn't a hot war. There was no shooting, there was no killing. It was the United States versus the Soviet Union, and they did everything they could against each other without actually fighting. Now, that being said, it was still a war, so it was still being fought. And so we're going to look at what strategies the United States used to try to defeat the spread of communism, because that's what it's all about. The United States was afraid that communism was going to spread, and we were going to do anything we could to stop the spread. So, again, Cold War, Soviet Union, USSR versus the United States. The first thing we're going to talk about is the Iron Curtain. Basically, after World War II was over, literally the next minute, the Cold War started. And what ends up happening is Stalin promises those Eastern European countries that they're going to get their freedom once the Nazis are defeated, and he lies. Instead of giving those Eastern European countries their freedom, he takes them over, he makes them turn into communist countries. This was a big red flag for the rest of the world, because then they knew that, okay, Stalin was a bad guy. And so what happens is the British Prime Minister, this guy right here, Churchill, he gives a speech where he says the spread of communism, it's almost as if an iron curtain has spread into Europe. What he was saying was that literally in his mind, Europe had become split between one side being communist, controlled by the Soviet Union, and the other side being democracy, capitalism, where everybody's free. Was the Iron Curtain a real thing? Was there actually a curtain made of iron? No. Get that through your head. It was not a real thing. He was just trying to make a point. And in reality, it does become a real thing. We'll talk about this more. It starts off as an idea, but then as time goes by in the Cold War, it basically becomes a real thing, this Iron Curtain. But in the beginning, the Iron Curtain is really just the idea that Europe has become split down the middle. One side communism, the other side democracy. And so here, this is a good illustration of what they were considering the Iron Curtain. It was. Oh, hold on one second. I'm trying to do something here. Oh, there we go. It's this spot right here. Look at this. This is what they were saying was the Iron Curtain. This entire area. Everything over here was communism. You like my say? I do. Everything over here was basically democracy. Okay? And so you had the Soviet Union side over here, communism. You had the democracy side over here, an Iron Curtain splitting it down the middle. And this is going to be important for us going forward. And remember, as always, you can pause as we go through this so you can answer up some questions. Because question number one for today is, what was the Iron Curtain? Ta-da! That's what we just did. There's your answer right in front of you. You got democracy and capitalism on one side versus communism, totalitarian dictatorship on the other side. And all of those words you should know the meanings of at this point of the year. So what were we going to do? We weren't going to attack the Soviet Union. We couldn't. They had nuclear weapons. They weren't going to attack us. We had nuclear weapons. But we still wanted to win this war, this Cold War. And so what we're going to do, and this is question two, what was the goal of President Truman's policy of containment? We're going to contain communism. And this is a really easy thing for you to understand right now because you're doing it. Think about what we're doing with this virus. We're quarantining ourselves. We're isolating ourselves so that we don't spread the virus. That's exactly what we tried to do to communism. We tried to put communism into isolation. We tried to quarantine it. We tried to contain it, stop it from spreading. And there's going to be two ways we did this. The first way we're going to do it is the president at the time, President Truman, has a plan. Guess what he calls it? The Truman Doctrine. Basically, what he's going to do is he's going to make a promise to any country that's being threatened by communism. He promises that we are going to give them help, economic, but mostly military help. So a good way to remember this is T equals tank. Truman equals tank. The Truman Doctrine equals that any country being threatened by communism, especially Turkey over here and Greece over here, we will give them military equipment to help them fight off communism. This is huge. Think about all the extra military equipment we have. This is right after the end of World War II. We have all this extra military equipment. We go, hey, we don't really need it. If you're being threatened by communism, we'll give some to you. And so we did. We give military equipment to Turkey. We give military equipment to Greece. And guess what? It works. They do not become communist. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. All right. So the first thing. So question number 3. What did the Truman Doctrine promise to countries that did not turn communism? Military and economic help. Emphasis on the military part. T equals tank. Okay. And so your next question is, did the Truman Doctrine work? Yes, it did. How do you know? Turkey and Greece did not become communist. It's that simple. And so here you go. This is some of the things that we gave to some countries. Mostly this graph is for Turkey. So we had a lot of submarines that we weren't using after World War II. Boom. Guess who gets it? Turkey. How about some guns? Turkey. How about some military advisors? Send them to Turkey. How about some U.S. planes that we're not using? Give them to Turkey. That is the Truman Doctrine. Anything that they needed to fight off communism, we gave them. And it worked. So, good for us. We tried something else also after World War II to stop communism in this idea of containment. We've talked about how Europe was destroyed after World War II. I mean, think of all the devastation from World War I. Now times that by 1 billion, and now you have World War II. Europe was completely destroyed, and these countries had to rebuild. And so what's going to happen is we're going to come up with a plan called the Marshall Plan, named after one of our Army generals. And the Marshall Plan is very much like the Truman Doctrine, but what it's going to do, it's going to give money to these European countries, straight up cash. And it basically says, if we give you cash, you have to promise not to be communist. These countries are starving. They're like, wait, you're going to give us money, and all we have to do is promise not to be communist? Yeah, we're in. Give us the money. And so we did. We gave them $13 billion. These are all these countries that we gave money to. Western Europe. Okay? If you remember that Iron Curtain, this is where it was, right here. Watch. Right there. We are literally going to rebuild Europe. $13 billion. To give you an idea today of how much money that is, that's over $103 billion in today's money. We paid for everything. So just like we had T equals tank for the Truman Doctrine, M equals money for the Marshall Plan. It's just an easy way to remember this. Honestly, if you put that in your head a couple times, you'll never forget it. And you can see what countries here got the most money. You have the United Kingdom getting a boatload. You got France getting a boatload. Italy getting a boatload. All these countries, we're just bankrolling them. We're giving them anything they need to stop the spread of communism. We're containing communism. And so guess what? It worked. The idea of containment, of keeping communism in the Soviet Union, it worked. That's the big idea. It actually worked. Communism does not spread into Europe. We're going to stop here for today. But understand, containment works in stopping communism in Europe. It does not work stopping communism in Asia, which is what we'll talk about next time. Hope you guys are all doing well. Everybody's safe. If you have any questions, hit me up.